All right, Joel Klatt is in Green Bay. How exciting, how fun. Nicest people in the world are in Buffalo and Green Bay. Nicest people you'll ever meet are there. Okay, so everybody's saying it's not a good enough draft to move up, but I tend to believe that these offensive coaches, when they see a unique piece, like a Collin Lovelin, they're like, oh, that worked. Now, a defensive coach, maybe not, but you did a ton of Collin Lovelin games. What did you see?
I love Collin Lovelin. I have him as my top tight end in the draft. And the reason, here's the reason. I really like Tyler Warren as well, but they're different types of players. You know, Warren exploits space that is created through scheme, and he does it incredibly well. He's a creative player, but Lovelin creates his own space, and that's difficult to do. And by the way, he produced with subpar quarterback play this last year before getting hurt at Michigan. You know, you look at the way that he runs routes from split out, from inline, all over the place, and he wins. And by the way, there's this misnomer that Tyler Warren is somehow way bigger than Collin Lovelin. They're basically the exact same size. I think Lovelin might be like 5 pounds lighter, but they're the same height. I love Lovelin's ability to get open. And to me, at the next level, in particular in the red zone and on third down, from a tight end perspective, can you create your own space and win? And Lovelin can do that.
Okay, so there's another player that you saw a ton of in the Big Ten, Ameer Ibuka, the wide receiver. He's not a burner, but I went to dinner with an offensive coordinator this past weekend. They're not going to draft him because of need. They loved him. He said total pro, starts day one. So again, this is a guy that when you looked at a lot of mock drafts, he was top of the second round. I'm sorry, but I have yet to talk to any source who didn't love him. Character, toughness. You did a ton of Buckeye games. What is he? What do you see?
He's my favorite player in the draft because of all the things that you just talked about. He's one of the greatest young men that I've covered just as a person, but he's also incredibly polished as a wide receiver. And this is what you also have to realize is that you've got to project from college systems into the NFL. And what position group in college football has been more dynamic and more can't miss than Ohio State wide receivers in the last 5 or 6 years, Colin? It's the best position group in college football in terms of projecting to the National Football League. And Ameer Ibuka is a great player. He can play in the slot. He's explosive. He runs clean routes. He is a great locker room guy. He catches everything. And here's one of the things, and something that I'll share tonight when we get on the air. This will just tell you everything about his character and what they believe in at Ohio State in that position room with Brian Hartline as their coach. Jeremiah Smith was going to come in as a true freshman, and Ameer Ibuka stayed back, and he wanted to play an extra year, not just for himself and to win a championship and so on and so forth, but he wanted to make sure that Jeremiah Smith had a connection to the lineage of the brotherhood of all the guys that are going to the National Football League, so that you can say that, yeah, it starts all the way back Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell, and then Chris Olave, and then Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then Marvin Harrison and Ameer Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith. He understood the links in that chain and wanted to stay back and mentor Jeremiah Smith, who might be better than all of them here in a couple of years. And that's one of the reasons he stayed back in Columbus.
So, I've said this before. Dan Marino and Aaron Rodgers famously dropped in the draft, and they got Green Bay and Don Shula. With NIL money now, it doesn't bother me at all. If I had a son and you told me Cleveland, the Giants, or the Steelers, I'd say drop in the draft and go to Pittsburgh. I don't love what they're doing, but they're really well run. They draft and develop players. So if Shadour's dropping, he's not going to be a savior in Pittsburgh. They're just looking for a starting quarterback. The Giants in Cleveland are looking for somebody to get him out of messes. What do you make of the reports that he's dropping?
They're true, first of all. I think it's 50-50 that Pittsburgh takes him. I know that their visit went really well. And there's also this I won't call it an issue, but there's this point that no one is making. Everyone's just talking about from the NFL perspective and the decision maker's perspective. And I will say this, remember, Shedeur has only played for his dad his whole life.
Yeah.
Colin. I think sometimes we forget that. Like, Little League on,
Yeah.
the only head coach he's known is Coach Prime. And so I think that there is some thought in the Sanders camp that it's not only about the organizational fit, but the head coaching fit. And I know that they would love to play for Mike Tomlin. So, you know, however that happens, I think that that's probably the place that Shedeur would like to end up for all of the reasons you were talking about, and this idea of the alpha head coach who's hyper confident and very successful, runs a clean program. I think that that's attractive for the Sanders camp as well, and that's something that not a lot of people have talked about.
So I had a general manager tell me it's a starless draft and Abdul Carter's a star. Somebody's going to take him high. You did Micah Parsons games at Penn State. You did Abdul Carter games. Is he in that class? Is he as good as Micah?
I think he can be, because think about it. Micah's dynamic and he's creative and he can play everywhere. I think as an off the ball linebacker, you can make an argument Micah is the better player. But I think as a pure edge rusher, I think Abdul Carter is better. I think he's a touch longer and a little bit more explosive in terms of his get off and pass rushing acumen. So as creative as Dallas can be with Micah Parsons, as good as he is, in my mind, I think that as a pass rusher and a disruptive force behind the line of scrimmage, that Abdul Carter could maybe even be better than what Micah has been in the National Football League. And listen, that's high praise, obviously, because I hold Micah in as maybe the best defender in the sport right now. But Abdul Carter has that ability. And I would just remind people, he's only played edge rusher for one season. Last year was the first time that he moved down and played edge kind of full time, and they moved him around a little bit. But you looked at him getting better and better and better all year. And then with one arm against Notre Dame in that CFP game, he had 7 pressures and was a game wrecker against Notre Dame.
You know,
to me, like, this guy's a no-brainer. I think that he makes your team better, and I would be shocked if New York doesn't select him at 3.
So I was saying earlier, it's Georgia players, even if they have character issues, even if they've underachieved a little, the bottom line is they get to the pros and they deliver. Ohio State's got some of that, where Ohio State guys practice against Ohio State guys, and if you draft a corner from Ohio State, he has been covering in practice for 3 years, first-round receivers. So I do look at these Georgia players, some of which have underachieved a little. Do you think teams think about that and go, he's a Buckeye. He competes against world class. I look at Ohio State and Georgia players. I did this with Saban and Bama. I'd be like, well, if Nick trusts him, it's. I mean, do you think teams think about that with like a Georgia or Ohio State?
I think that teams are seeing some of these players, and gosh, I'm blanking names off the top of my head, but you're seeing some players right now in the league, go double-digit sacks every single year that didn't have much production in their college career. And so when you look at defensive linemen and particular edge rushers in this draft, you've got a lot of guys that you can put into 2 camps: traits, measurables, potential, or production at the college level. So you've got the Mike Greens or the Donovan Ezerakus, who had 16 and a half last year, led the country, led the Power 4. And you've got that camp, or you've got the Shamar Stewarts and some of these other guys that maybe underperformed on the stat sheet, but have the traits that would suggest that they can come in and be explosive in the National Football League. I think that the trend is towards traits, because you're seeing players. Who's the guy? He was selected number 1 overall. Trayvon Walker, right?
Yeah.
And he did not have much. He didn't start even much at Georgia, and now he's becoming a guy that has, I think, 10 and a half sacks last year.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of that out of NFL decision makers. But one thing that I would just throw in there, I know it's not specific to this question, Colin, but I think it's an interesting overarching theme that now we're going to have to deal with when we're talking about the transactional nature of college football. I'm hearing more and more and more of the question marks from these GMs and coaches around the league of, does this guy love football? And it just strikes me that as college football becomes more transactional around transfer portal and NIL, we're teaching kids that the biggest issue or thing that they should be concerned about is their brand and how much money they're making. So then a lot of them make a lot of money in college football, and then they sit in these meetings in the draft process with these assistant coaches that they make 10 times more money than, and they're like, who are you? And so there's been more of that going on this year of, hey, this was a bad meeting, this or that. And it's like, hey, there's a lot of bitter assistant coaches in the National Football League that have not made a ton of money, and they have not moved up the ladder. And then these kids walk in and they don't kiss their butts. And so then they run around to the next guy that'll write an article for them, and they start talking about how this kid's interviews were terrible. There's a lot of that going on. It's a different nature of the draft process, I think, this year than any other year that I've covered.
Okay, finally, I watched Cam Ward at Washington State. I thought he was really talented. I didn't think first overall pick in the draft. I watched him at Miami. I thought, oh, he's really talented. I don't really think he's the number one pick in the draft, and now he is. So is this a matter of he plays the position and the team drafting really needs him? When you watched him in college, when did you ever think, wow, he could be a number one pick? I thought that with Caleb 4 games into USC. I thought it with Jaden Daniels at LSU. I'm like, this kid put on weight from ASU. That kid's a baller. I never looked at Cam as a number one pick. Is this just position and need? Did you see him in college as a dominant player?
Well, let's reframe it, because we're not grading on a scale of 100 to be the number one overall pick. We're not rating him to be the number one overall pick. We are rating him on a scale, like this on a curve, excuse me. And the curve is what else is available. If you're Tennessee, you have to select the best available quarterback, period. Cam Ward is the best available quarterback this year. I happen to believe it's a bad year to be in that position for Tennessee. If you're looking at the 12 guys that were selected in the top, or excuse me, the 6 guys that were selected in the first 12 picks a year ago, I think Cam would maybe be 5th or 6th in that class, probably outside of the top 6. And yet this year he's going to be number one. That's not a knock against Cam. That's the year in which he's coming out. He's got great confidence, great arm strength, a quick release. He can threaten every blade of grass out there. But there's no doubt he's going to have to grow and develop at the next level. And I think that he can. I really do. But it's a curve. It's not a scale to 100. It's a curve, and he's got the right year to be at the top of the curve.
Yeah, he's got the right year. That's absolutely. Joel Klatt.
Real quick, I know you put up your mock draft. Let me just tell you.
Okay.
Genty's going 5, Jacksonville. Okay, so switch that. Mimbu does not get past the Bears. There's no chance. Mimbu is going to be a top 10 pick. Will Johnson is sliding along with Jihad Campbell because of injury issues and medicals. And if the Rams are trading, it would be for Omarion Hampton.
Ooh.
And if there's a trade for Loveland, it's likely to be Denver. So watch out for that. Yours is really good, really good. You're right. You're on the same track as most people.
So
it's a very good informed, but watch out for Mimbu in the top 10.
So Will Johnson. So the Bears would go offense again. They've done a lot of offense.
Line. I think offensive line.
What about the Niners and Kelvin Banks? They need offensive linemen.
Yeah, they do, but they need everything. Remember, like they're decimated from free agency, so they need to rebuild their roster overall. So I believe that they're going to just take the best overall player that they see on the board.
If the Rams like Hampton, is that acknowledging that Blake Corum was a miss?
That's a good thought. But that's a possibility. There's no doubt. It's also an acknowledgement that Hampton is a pretty dynamic player, both catching it and running it. So, I think that Sean really likes him. I don't know if they're gonna trade, because they also love Collin Lovelin and they also love Ameer Ibuka. So, in my mind, I think they would be happy with any of those 3. And they feel like they could probably stand pat and get one of those 3. They're hoping Omarion drops to them. I don't think that they would release capital to go get him, knowing that they love Collin Lovelin as well as Ameer Ibuka.
This is so much fun. Joel Klatt, good seeing you, buddy.